Okay, in the previous video, talked about the stages of meiosis and pointed out that there are more stages in meiosis than what we had in mitosis. So there's more complexity. The other thing to notice is that mitosis occurs throughout the body. It produces all the somatic cells. So all of your cells other than the egg cells and the sperm cells were produced by mitosis. Meiosis, on the other hand, occurs only in a limited set of tissues, specifically the ovaries and the testes. In plants, it would be the plant equivalents of the ovaries and testes. So it's much more difficult to get slides of meiosis than it is mitosis. So we're not really going to be able to look at the stages of meiosis the way we did with mitosis. Instead, we're going to look at a couple of structures where mitosis occurs, the ovaries and the testes. So with the ovary, we have things that we're going to look for. We're going to look for the primary follicles, secondary follicles, Graafian follicles, and corpus luteum. This is also the order of development. So when you have the lab exam, you're going to need to be able to identify these follicles as well as put them in their correct order of development. Now remember, down here at the bottom, the follicle is the chamber. Inside the follicle you have what's called the oocyte, and the oocyte is a cell that's actually undergoing meiosis. Okay? So let's go over here, and you have right here all of these small chambers that you see right here. Those are the primary follicles. What we're looking at is a cross-section of an ovary. This is an ovary that's been sliced, and we're looking at one thin slice of it placed on the microscope, and we're looking down on that. So, right here, these little small chambers, hundreds if not thousands of those in this ovary. All of those are sitting there in place in this ovary when the individual from whom this ovary was taken was born. So those primary follicles will sit there in this form. They are right there at the very beginning of meiosis. They're diploid cells. They will sit there in this form until puberty. Beginning with puberty, one of these will take off and it will begin to develop to this stage right here, what's called secondary follicle. The follicle itself, the chamber is much larger. Now the oocyte right there, which would be this little dot that you see here in the primary follicle, that oocyte is much larger, and at this stage this has pretty much gone through about that first division of meiosis. Okay, so over here the next stage is a Graafian follicle, and with the Graafian follicle the oocyte is moved to one side of the follicle and it has tissue built up around it. Now here it's broken away because of the process of making this slide. But this would be around meiosis 2. Not meiosis 2, but metaphase 2 in meiosis 2. And this is right before the oocyte is released from the ovary. Okay? The next stage after that would be the corpus luteum. So the oocyte has been released from the ovary, and we're left with this empty chamber right here, right over here. That might be one right there. Now this empty chamber still has a function to it. You notice the lining of this corpus luteum. Those cells forming that lining will begin to produce hormones in preparation for pregnancy. If the pregnancy does not occur, the corpus luteum fizzles away, and this whole process starts up again with another primary follicle taking off, developing to a secondary follicle, which then becomes the Graafian follicle, which then releases the oocyte, and we're back to corpus luteum again. Okay, let's go over here and look at this one. So the other structure where meiosis occurs is the testis, and where testis is singular, testes is plural. So there's a lot of different tissues in the testes, but we're just going to look for two tissues here. We're going to look for the seminiferous tubules, which are the actual site of meiosis, and we're going to look for the interstitial cells, which produce the hormone testosterone. So, seminiferous tubules, as you see right here, these are, again, what we're looking at is a thin slice of a testis. It's laid on a microscope slide, and we're looking down on this. These, each of these chambers that you see with a heavy wall around the outside is a tube. It's cut crossways. We're looking down on it. That tube goes down, it folds back and forth. So some of these chambers, like this one, and then this one over here, and then this one right here, could all be the same continuous tube folded back and forth, and we're just looking at different places in that tube where it's cut. The cells right along this wall are diploid. Those cells are undergoing meiosis. As they undergo meiosis, they are pushed towards this chamber in the middle, and they will mature in that chamber in the middle as sperm cells. So, seminiferous tubules are real easy to spot. They are these structures that have this heavy wall around the outside. More difficult to find would be the interstitial tissues. Interstitial tissues are going to be small groups of cells, and also the cells themselves are quite small. And these do not have this heavy wall around the outside. These are producing the hormone testosterone. Now, what we're seeing here in this slide is one particular cut with one type of stain. Here's the same thing with a different cut and a different stain. So just different method of preparing the slide. But again, you can see the seminiferous tubules have the heavy wall around the outside. Interstitial cells do not have that heavy wall around the outside. Also, inter means between, and these interstitial cells are located in between the seminiferous tubules. Okay. Now then, what was missing from those, because of the way they were prepared, was the sperm cells. In this slide, we've got a different preparation, and all the little black squiggly lines that you see right there, that's the sperm flagella extending into that chamber in the middle of the seminiferous tubule. Okay, so we'll stop this video at this point, and then we'll pick up with a third video here for the some of the terminology related to genetics. Okay, thank you.